These are the four contexts that we will be talking about today. To begin with, we'll be talking about our site design, and then we'll move into our individual buildings that we've developed for Main Street. So starting off with our site design, we'll look into the research that we dedicated for this project. So to begin with, we looked into the 3 research books that are located in the top right-hand side, and we looked into them to understand what affordable housing is and the concept behind it and the importance of it. From there, it helped us understand why we're doing this research and how to dedicate it to our project. So in order to develop our project, it was also very helpful to understand its impact and how it can positively affect our environment and our surrounding community. We also listed the building, master plan, and form development precedents that we use to help us develop our master plan and building designs. So for our site context, so we're approximately 10 minutes away from downtown St. Louis. Our site is 57 acres, and it is actually where Krugit-Igoe Housing Complex used to be, but it was demolished in the 1970s. So at the moment, there are no existing developments on the site, and for the area, it actually lacks local access to food, entertainment, and retail options. So looking into that, if you look at the surrounding zone, you see that there are more educational and residential developments in this area. So for commute purposes, it takes approximately 10 minutes from here on automobile to get to downtown. However, due to traffic with the city, it does sometimes take between 30 minutes. For walking purposes, it does take about 44 minutes to get to where you need to get for any local access to the options mentioned before. This area is also affected by the digital divide, which means that the area does lack sufficient access to internet. So the team's design strive to decimate these existing hardships that are currently on the site.
Okay, so before we could begin building massings and forms, we had to first break down this acres of site into different parcels. We started first by wanting to pull some activity off of Jefferson Street and Cass by creating this focal point axis, sort of. Next, we started playing off this concept by proposing a Main Street split in between the center of our site, which then created 2 secondary paths that run vertically on that site. Next, we created, on the third image, we created a Main Street that runs vertically on that road. And then playing off that, we then subdivided those vehicular access and created pedestrian paths that looped around the site and also ran through in between and across the sites as well. We then moved on to develop that Main Street area by breaking them down and dividing them into plaza spaces. And through the composition of all of this, we were able to come up with this final circulation design of our site. Next is our form development, which was highly influenced by our SoA analysis research. Our main goal and challenge was the mitigation of solar exposure, as the temperature in St. Louis, as we know, is excessively high. Our goal was also to form and develop a community space and maintain interaction and also creating public and private spaces. So for our program development and conceptual proposal, an accessible, equitable, sustainable, and connective community was desired as the concept that was dedicated to this program. As I had talked about, bringing in the Main Street concept was highly influenced by developing this walkable commerce space that would also encompass and have programs of offices, daycare, senior centers, cultural buildings, educational spaces, and many communal services along the street of along that main street. We also try to connect each and every of these programs together, especially the residential areas, by means of bridges, overhead bridges that cross across the site as well, so you could experience this site from not just the ground but also from the upper level. Um, the next we're talking about.
So because our site is 57 acres, which to put that in perspective, that is 57 football fields. It is a huge site. So in order to develop this, you would actually have to do it in phases. So we set about deciding which would be the most important pieces of the phasing. And so our buildings that we're going to show you today are actually in phase 1. And then we have, on the next slide, we show the development in phase 2 and phase 3. And phase 3 also has a cultural building in it, which we've left open at this point. We haven't decided for the site what their cultural experience would be, because that really should be the neighborhood that decides that. This, that has a rich history, that should be something that they should be able to use to share that experience.
So looking at the site activity on the site, so these diagrams mainly focus on showing the pedestrian and vehicular activity happening through the site. So like Joy mentioned before, as well as Kristel, we really wanted to center around the idea of having a walkable retail promenade that would enhance healthier lifestyles, as well as capture and strengthen the culture and safety of the community. We also have integrated multiple different areas for green space. These green spaces will be there to help uplift the mental and well-being of those on our site, as well as visiting the area. Like mentioned before, since the site is so massive, we developed the entire area to include different types of activities that will keep people interactive throughout the entire space. And as they're walking through, they experience different types of zones and cultures throughout the entirety of the site. So when you first begin to walk through, you have different areas, different types of buildings usage. For the phase 2 and 3 buildings, they are really up to the community what they want to develop, but we've just basically proposed the ideas of what they could do. But for the retail promenade area, we really focus in on divulging and creating an art zone that transfers into a kids zone and then ends with a fitness zone to just keep the community involved in different activities through the site, as well as we have our 3 buildings, Main Street Core, Aurora Place, and Cass Manor, that we'll be discussing later in the presentation. So looking into the idea of our sustainability assessment, we really pulled from the principles of the 10 principles from the AIA design framework to help us really understand how to make this site more sustainable in purposes. So for instance, with the walkable retail promenade, it was the idea that it integrates the surrounding community, as well as promotes wellness and economic growth for the area. Not only that, do we want to really focus in on promoting the area socially and economically, but we really looked into keeping the existing ecosystem that is already on the site livable. So we really wanted to enhance it and really keep it as active as possible throughout the entirety of the area. And like mentioned before, this is where Crooked Igo once sat. So really looking into how its development failed and looking into how their previous goal sets and transferring into our own goal sets to uplift what they already have, but maybe just exceed it a little bit more to make it more interactive and more welcoming for people to actually visit the area and feel more welcome. So these are the site renderings. So this kind of showcases when you're standing on the site, like where you're at and what you're going to see when you experience the So on the first image, you're looking at Main Street Court and Cass Manor, and that's sitting in the kids zone, and you're kind of looking down the retail promenade. The second image on the right is with Aurora Place and Cass Manor, and you can kind of see where the fitness zone is, as well as the connection between Aurora and Cass, and then also a zoomed in of the kids zone in front of Main Street Court.
So we'll be talking about Aurora Place, which is the block that I developed on the project. The first one is the solar energy analysis that we did, and you can see how we went from the very first shape of the lot that we were using in the iterations and the slides way back, and then we start cutting out, and as we start cutting out and running and rerunning the iterations, you know, you see how that helps mitigate some of that solar gain, because again, in St. Louis, you do not want as much solar gain because their summers are much more dangerous than their winters. From there, then started to work on the program development, and this is where we just started showing the vertical accesses and the horizontal. Some of the building codes that we followed. We followed the St. Louis City Code and also the IDC. I believe it was 2018, which is also what the city of St. Louis uses. This is the ground floor plan of Aurora Place. I have an intergenerational care center in mind, which is something that is becoming more and more popular. It is where the senior center and the daycares are not separated any longer, but they're actually moving them into the same building to where the seniors can interact with the children. A lot of people aren't around their own family. They now have an opportunity to still interact with different generations. So this would be the intergenerational care center, and then we have mostly the amenities or security, main offices, and then the rest of the building on the ground floor is retail. The second floor, some of the spaces didn't lend themselves well to actually putting in a place to live. This is one of the gathering spaces. This is actually at this point. So you still get a view. You would actually be looking at towards downtown St. Louis in this area. But it's just a place where if you don't necessarily want to be in your apartment, but you don't want to be outside, you can still be in the building, but you can still be around other people. This is one of the typical studio units, which run approximately around 800 square feet. This is the third floor. We still have different pause areas. This moves out, and you can see outside in the courtyard also. Then amenity spaces, exercise rooms and such, laundry rooms, the connected parking garage. And then we start getting into the green roof spaces, and it actually ended up extending that green roof space up onto the next level because there was enough room to do that. This building has approximately 98 units in it that range anywhere from 800 square feet to 1,600 square feet, depending on if they're a 1-bedroom, studio, 2-bedroom, or 3-bedroom. So they'll accommodate different sizes of families. This is one of the shots of the green roof, and there is gardening space, there is lawn space. So if they don't want to necessarily go down on the promenade, they do have a more private space that they can barbecue or just hang out on. This is one of the typical 3-bedroom units. Then the staircase, the quality stair, thank you, does rise up all 5 floors. Section view where you can see where the quality stair cuts up through the building. There are 2 elevators in it because the building is huge. Didn't want people to have to walk from one part of the building to almost a half a block to get to the other, you know. So the elevators are split in 2 on this. It's just the the rendered version of it, and it does show the connection between Cass Manor and Aurora Place, the bridge, the pedestrian bridge. My structural system is called a 5/1, or it's a 5-story heavy timber over podium slab. The podium slab actually acts as a foundation on its own, so then you can now build 5 stories up with heavy timber. When I was researching into heavy timber, it even has its own flooring system. So we have a mass timber flooring system. It carries weights much better than a light construction does. There's also a 3-hour fire rating between the bottom level and the upper residential levels, so that gives a little bit extra protection. They do require a different sprinkler system, so they have to have an NFPA 13 sprinkler system installed in these buildings. This is becoming a more common form of construction because it is actually a cheaper alternative to an all-steel building. It also is more eco-friendly, believe it or not. This is a list of some of the building materials that were used throughout the building. The Zinco intensive roof garden. I did not use as deep of one because I'm not doing heavy plantings on mine. It is mostly lawn and flower beds. And then I actually have raised beds up on that second level of the rooftop garden. Using this was pro rear ventilation. The plus in using the rear ventilation facade systems is it helps reduce humidity in the building. It helps keep the building temps stable from interior to exterior. Because in the summer it has what's called a chimney effect, so it is actually moving that air through the facade systems. And in the winter, it also helps keep the building dry from condensation buildup. I did hit Ashayeri standards. It took a lot. Again, I think it has to do with the way our buildings are oriented. There's only so much you can do to reduce that solar gain that's happening on your building. But I did take it down to 27, so I did hit Ashayeri even though I didn't hit our 2030. These are some of the renderings. We do have the bridge connection, which would also have gathering areas between Cass Manor and Aurora Place. Pictures of the rooftop gardens. This is the intergenerational care center, and then some of the ground retail spaces. And this is looking towards, it would be Cass Manor and Aurora Place.
Okay, next I will be discussing Main Street 4, which is the building that I designed. There are massing iterations, as Kristel had discussed. We first started with basic massing forms, and thanks to the solar analysis study, we were able to move things around, push and pull, and iterate things to reduce our solar energy consumption until we got our final building form. Onto program development. So after creating this overall building form, we proceeded into subdividing our overall form into smaller portions, because this would have led into our better understanding of the kind of spaces that we wanted in our building and the understanding of our floor plans from level to level. Next, those little massive forms that we created led into creating these horizontal and vertical circulations, and in turn helped us to know where we could place our mechanical spaces as well as waste systems, which I had on every floor and every wing of my building. I further went in to also create atrium and void spaces, which was a strategy I incorporated to increase ventilation as well as interaction between this big massive form that I had to work with. Um, Main Street Core has been designed to serve more of the educational sector of the buildings on the site. The placement and design strategy of Main Street Core orbits around this focal courtyard gathering space that I had created for visitors and residents that would help encourage and like volumize that concept of community that we are trying to do with the whole entire site. I designed this by carefully placing retail spaces along the border of Main Street, which was a concept we all incorporated, but then because of the size and nature of the building, I also brought in those retail spaces into that courtyard space to continue to sort of form like a continuation of that interaction between Main Street and also the inside of my building. To the left, I position office spaces as well as those educational spaces, which comprise of computer labs and study rooms and like classroom areas as well. To the south are my mechanical spaces, which include storage spaces, bike areas, laundry rooms, as well as just general mechanical spaces for the building as well. And then towards the right of the floor plan is about 3,000 square feet arcade space, which also brought in some part of that entertainment aspect, which Alex would talk about further, to bring in some of that entertainment and restaurant spaces into that building area as well. On my second level, I also took up those commerce spaces upstairs to keep that interaction between the retail spaces from the ground floor all the way up to the second floor, but not directly into the residential spaces, as you can see. I tried to volumize that and like mix that with the residential by incorporating these green roof gathering areas that would be that connect to the multi-purpose areas, which are the commerce spaces and as well as the fitness areas. I also designed vertical walkable gallery spaces, actually two of them, that would allow people experiencing these commerce spaces as well as the residents to like walk through that space without it being like just a long, boring walk, because these are very large spans of square footage to experience. Over to the left are the residential spaces. I must, for me to say also, all of my floors from my second floor up to my fourth floor all have studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms distributed across them, because I did not want to just position only a certain kind of residential living, to confine a certain kind of residential living to a certain kind of floor or area. So they are both like evenly distributed, but all exist along the same wing. Like for instance, towards this portion are 2 bedrooms and studios, and here are 1 bedrooms, but they're still intertwined together in some way. I also position mechanical spaces with waste areas and some storage spaces along every wing of the building. Also importantly to mention, is a bridge connection between these commerce spaces towards the north and the residential spaces, to give direct access to the residents to those commerce spaces instead of having to go all around the building or going all the way to the ground floor before they're able to access those commerce spaces. So it's almost like a private bridge. It's almost like a private connection for the residents to those commerce spaces. Following that is my third level, which I incorporated a larger green roof, which would, as we know, green roofs help with island effects and would help reduce the energy consumption and heat island effects of the overall building. This would also helps accentuate that the views of the buildings for the residents, because this rooftop garden and this lounge area kind of connect together to bring the residents into and have those residents experience not just the surrounding areas of the building, but also of the exterior side as well. Fourth floor is basically the same communal lounge areas distributed across, as highlighted in the orange, for the residents to be able to interact with each other and also surrounding areas. Okay, now these are my building section, and as you can see in my east-west section, you can see some of those quality stairs that run in between those atrium spaces that connect from floor to floor to further emphasize that interaction between floor to floor and also create a visual as well as aesthetic interactions for the residents and into their own surrounding. These are perspective sections that cut through that connective bridge and also residential spaces as well and into the courtyard. So it allows you see how that rooftop garden at the top sits and like looks down into that courtyard as well as back into the exterior side. This is for my structural system. I use skeleton steel framing system completely throughout the building with a tack line reinforced concrete bearing wall foundation, as Kristel talked about. I just also pulled up and showed some of those green roof spaces that I had previously discussed in design. These are a list of my building materials that I had used for both the exterior and the interior spaces. Now, facade system, Kristel had talked about the zinc-intensive roof garden that we had, I think, unanimously used. I have also made use of the stove tech for masonry veneer system, which is favorable in promoting controlled thermal conditions thanks to its fully engineered rain screen system. I had also, in an attempt to reduce solar gain also coming into the building, I have implemented vertically oriented aluminum reverse solar shading devices that would be controlled by the occupants of the space. I have also, according to the section, as you can see, included some sort of overhangs also that would help reduce that solar gain into some of those residential spaces. Kristel had talked about the operational energy analysis, which we had conducted, and I am guessing it's because of the scale of the building, but I had ran this multiple times after and before creating my building, and I was able to get it down to about 44.1. These are renderings showing the rooftop garden top left shows the rooftop garden that I had talked about for the commerce spaces and the mixed and residential. Top right shows the courtyard space as well as bridge connective, that bridge connectivity that I had discussed, and more photos of that rooftop garden and lobby areas. This is just a rendering of the exterior of my building, just showing how those facades sit as well as those little residential overhangs as well. And sorry, this is an overall rendering of my general site as well as the exterior portion of the site.
Continuing from there, we'll begin talking about cast manner. So like mentioned before, we did a lot of solar analysis research to understand how the building's shaped with the solar exposure. So these follow the same forms like my teammates have discussed from the master plan. So in final, I concluded with the final massing iteration. I've made tweaks through it throughout the entire process, you will see. So for the program development of how we did it, it was very crucial for us to helping understand the floor-to-floor layout. So taking that massing that I got from the solar analysis research and then just basically maneuvering it to where I could fit all the dedicated program spaces that I wanted to include, which also, like Julie and Kristel both mentioned, helped me develop my horizontal and vertical circulation, as well as my placements for my mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and waste systems. And then for added perks to my building, adding in the building voids and atrium spaces to help with the solar and as well as mitigate the light that's coming through. So for the ground level of Cast Manor, it is like we stated before, it is the entertainment center for the site. So there are more retail restaurant spaces, as well as there are a few office spaces incorporated in. So this area actually focuses more on building amenities. So there is a bike storage, and on the far right-hand side, there is a bowling alley for the residents and public to be able to use, as well as there are multiple different areas for communal spaces. There is an interactive courtyard space located on the ground level to promote the wellness and uplift the social being of those visiting the area as well as living. For the second level, there is approximately 8 studios and 10 one-bedrooms located on this level, as well as multiple different areas for communal lobby spaces. There is an interactive community garden space located on the southern portion of the building, and it actually faces towards the St. Louis cityscape. So it's a nice area for the residents to plant their own plants as well as their flowers, and then it could be a nice little social gathering space as well as a nice place to look at to see the city of St. Louis. On this level, you will see that there are 3 connecting bridges that will connect to Main Street Court, Aurora Bridge, as well as the parking garage that's located on that portion of the site. For the third level, we'll move into bringing up 2 more studio spaces and then adding in 11 2-bedroom spaces that is showcased on the far right of an example of what they would probably look like. There are also multiple residential lounge areas. This was incorporated to promote people to gather around and just have a good time and hang out and not always have to be so confined in their rooms, but just to create another space for interactive areas. There is also a green space located on this. However, it is just more of a kind of like nice, relaxing area to look into, and people can just help promote the wellness of those visiting here. For the fourth level, it's mostly dedicated towards 3-bedroom as well as having 2 studio apartments moving upward through the building. It also has its own communal lounge areas. So the rooftop is a dedicated interactive green lounge area to promote people to walk through and kind of look around on the site. Like mentioned with Kristel's rooftop space of like they can go up here, have them to go up, relax, and just kind of walk around the site and take a look at the area. And this is also a really good focal point to look into the cityscape too as well. Continuing from here, with the building sections, what they highlight the vertical axis going through the buildings from the east and west portions as well as the north and south. Continuing from here to showcase where the atrium spaces are located through the building as well as the vertical axis through Cass Manor. So for the structural system, as the same as Main Street Core, we incorporated using the skeleton steel framing system for its reduced construction costs, future adaptability, and its design flexibility. And we also incorporated a Type 1 reinforced concrete bearing wall system because of its high durability, low energy costs, and low maintenance. This showcases the building materials used throughout the entirety of Cass Manor from exterior to interior. Like discussed before, we all unanimously agreed to use the intensive roof garden system because of its many benefits that it does provide for my space. For Cass Manor space, it really focuses on just small plants, small trees, and then landscapes. Also using the masonry veneer system because of its excellent thermal conditions mentioned from Joy, and also looking into the solar shading devices used on here. So on the southern portion of Cass Manor, there are horizontal shading devices there because of the sun orientation. And as you move from the west to the east facade, Cass Manor incorporates vertical solar shading devices because of the sun orientation. So for the operational energy analysis of Cass Manor, because of how massive it is, it was difficult to lower the energy consumption of the building. However, through different means of adding in the different types of materials, as well as adding in the atrium spaces, it was able to lower to an 87.2. So just to articulate some of the spaces that are happening throughout Cass Manor. So on the ground level, this is what you would see if you're standing in the courtyard space, and continuing on onto the second level of what the community garden will look like and how it will face towards St. Louis, and then reiterating the rooftop garden as well as showcasing the bridge connection between Aurora Place and Cass Manor. And this shot showcases the southern exterior facade system of Cass Manor to show the solar shading devices as well as how the green spaces are connected and what you will experience going through the building.
In conclusion, our site and building design is focused on establishing the community's involvement, ultimately leading to communal growth. This diagram, as discussed, just illustrate all of those activity zones as well as the mixed-use buildings that have been carefully designed and placed to promote our overall concept of connectivity and community. These are the resources that we have consulted throughout the process of our design. And thank you for listening to our presentation. We now open the floor for comments, questions, and concerns.